Hello there. I love saying that. That's still my favorite intro line I've ever used. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. It's great fun. Welcome to the show. We've got nobody watching right now. It's brilliant. I'm joined with me by Louise Hutt, Hamilton City Councillor, newest batch of the bunch. Enjoying the role?
Yeah, yeah. It's often I describe it as never a dull moment.
I can imagine because you've got a really interesting makeup of council down there. You've got some who are very much right wing, some who are very much left wing. There's a couple of unknown components in there as well because it's such a fresh sort of term. It must be a fascinating thing to finally be on the inside and seeing how that's all going together.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that's part of the job as well, is that you have no idea who you will be elected with.
Hmm.
You know, we can look at some of the voter data, and incumbents are usually re-elected, but it can be a few wild cards in there. So it's certainly very interesting. I've never worked a job quite like it.
So one of the wild cards that you've got is a well-known fan of spreading misinformation and disinformation, and a big follower of places like Voices for Freedom. Um, have you sort of butted heads with them yet, or has that come out in play in how that sort of process works within council?
Um, uh, no butting heads of yet, but it's early in the term. Um,
True.
I would say that probably today was some of our most robust debating in the chamber, today's council meeting. But I mean, I think having robust debate is actually like good. It's good for
Mhm.
democracy, and I don't think we erred into any misinformation today, but it was a very long council meeting, so
I was actually really surprised because you had the guys from Shaw's Bird Park who have been big fans of counterspin media and that kind of thing show up, and there was no questions for them. There was no debate or sort of general stuff from the floor other than them giving their statements. It was sort of a yep, unaccepted next.
yeah, I we were sort of talking about it afterwards, and we were having some technical issues.
Yeah.
So we would normally have had the council resolution up on the board. So what it is that we're voting on. So um, we accepted the Shaw's Bird Park petition, but I'm not sure if people in the public gallery realised that was what we were doing when we voted, because we had quite a lot of things to get through today. So
Yes.
we were moving quite quickly through things, and then we went onto the Three Waters item. So I'm not quite sure if everyone in the public gallery was quite following some of that procedure, but I mean, you're doing the best you can in
Yeah.
the chamber, especially with technology. Um,
Oh yeah.
I'm always impressed by the logistics of it all.
It's complicated. It cannot be easy for them. Out of curiosity, because I missed part of it for the seminar that I went to with the local government reform stuff. Um, After what happened last weekend, has there been a shift in views from elected officials around Three Waters?
Um, Not really.
Okay. Cool.
I each to their own opinion. But I think there's still still quite a lot of skepticism, I guess, about it. But it's I guess that's also part of the job, is that it's this really interesting time to come into local government when there is so much reform on the table, and things that were the bread and butter of council for decades are now going to be the government's responsibility. So it's really, like I said, never a dull moment. It's it's so interesting, and I think I used to work for the DHB, and they've just gone through healthcare reform, and yep, there was a lot of skepticism, but I think at least in that sector there was also a little bit of optimism that maybe this change could bring about some good things. Potentially there's the potential for that, so I like to hold on to that. There is
That's
the
good.
potential for good outcomes in reform.
So that brings me very nicely actually to this reform process around local government New Zealand. One of their sort of remits was that they have to look at how local government works without looking at the policy that local government is having changed on them.
Mm.
So things like Three Waters, things like different asset management, RMA reforms, stuff like that, are not supposed to play into these reforms that they're looking at. Um, from your perspective, sort of behind the curtain, is that problematic? Like, is it possible to do a reform on local government without looking at those changes that are coming?
I mean, you've got some overarching things that are broken in this system, right? Like the majority of council's income comes from rates. That is a system that is inherently broken. You know, there was a lot of discussion today about, the value for ratepayers and, the cost of living crisis on them. But there's actually no guarantee, if you kept rates low, that the many tenants in our city, the people, there's no guarantee that any of those rate savings would actually ever be passed along to them and the, cost of living crisis that they're facing. Um, so there's so many different things about it. So we, have the ability to raise our income by raising rates,
Mhm.
and keeping rates low is a way of, sorry, Brad's just really distracted me.
That's right. Hey, Brad.
um, yeah, so that is the main form of income, which directly affects some people, but the decisions of council, the wider decisions we make around, libraries and parks and stuff affects everyone, but our income stream only affects some people.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know. It's broken to me.
That makes sense. One of the things that came through in the report actually was the cost of mandated undertakings that councils get given from central government without funding. Basically, you
Mm.
do this because is that sort of a big element of what councils have to do? Is there more sort of mandated elements to what council does than people realize?
Um, uh, Something that I hadn't had put into words for me before during the induction is, oftentimes council is described as an organization that has, I think it's 23 different businesses,
Hmm.
like 23 different departments. And like, good luck keeping abreast of
Oh
every
yeah.
single thing happening in every single one of them and understanding in great detail the scope of everything. And so certainly I try to stay at that governance level. you know, you've got that separation between governance and operation that a lot of
Yeah.
it can be an easy trap to fall into for elected members. Um, but yeah, it's complex. There's just so much going on.
Yeah. It sounds messy.
Yeah, yeah. And I think often, like, quite often I field questions from the public. Someone messaged me the other day, and like this was a great question. They were like, "I have a privet tree on my neighbour's driveway.
Hmm.
I want to tell you as city council about it." And I was like, "That's great, but
But
that's not. You need to talk to regional council." And they were
Mhm.
like, "Oh, why do I need to tell them?" I'm like, "Those are the guys that deal with like pest trees." Like that's their job, that's not our job. Like I love that, like thank you for telling me about it. Like that sucks. I'm sorry that you have a tree causing you lots of allergies, but like that's regional council's job. And I think that a lot of the time the differentiation between regional councils and city and district councils and even central government, it's not intuitive.
Mhm.
um, and you could take another example of this as, there are a lot of people who are quite upset about our traffic islands and our berms that haven't been mowed. Um, and rightly upset that they are not as beautiful, up to standard as they could be. Growing a lot of
That surely
dandelions at
is
the
an
moment.
eye in the beauty in the eye of the beholder kind of thing.
Yeah, all the biodiversity advocates are like, oh,
Mhm.
dandelions good for bees.
Mhm.
But a lot of people are quite upset about that. They want our city to look, beautiful. But a lot of the places where they haven't been mowed are not local council roads. They're on state highways, which belongs to Waka Kotahi.
Mhm.
So people come to us and are like, I'm really upset you haven't done this. And it's like, that one's not ours. Some of the roads are ours, but not that one. And so it's not, there's nothing about that that's intuitive.
So that was actually another one of the things that came up in this review. I don't know if you've had a chance to look through the review document because I realize
A
that
little bit.
yeah, one of the things that they want to do is tie in those kind of services so it becomes more of a sort of interregional interaction. So it's not necessarily saying you need to amalgamate, but there has to be some sort of way of getting closer working relationships with these organizations. I'm guessing that sounds like something that would work really well for you.
Yeah, I definitely think there are some services where um, having a whole heap of individual organizations all reinventing the wheel and all having weirdly specific responsibilities that the public would never intuitively guess at,
Hmm.
but is quite complex behind the scene. I mean, that's just not very, it's not necessarily very efficient. Um, but I think there's also that balancing, and I've seen this in a lot of different councils' responses to Three Waters reform and RMA reform, is that fear of losing local control. And so I think sometimes when you're looking at amalgamation is not quite the right word, but when you're looking at doing things differently, I think there can be that fear of losing control over how something's done, even if it would be more efficient and you would potentially save money. Um, it's interesting.
Is one of the big things actually that came up was the sort of idea of intergenerational planning.
Mm,
And it sounds very much like what you've been dealing with there is what we have to deal with now as ratepayers, what our ratepayers want. But that sort of intergenerational planning can lead to lower costs long term. It can lead to better spread out of costs long term. Is intergenerational planning something that you've found isn't really there at the moment, or is people don't get their heads around it very easily? Because I mean, you've councils all have long term plans, which is generally intergenerational.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I turned 30, big 30 in December, and it's really interesting to go into long-term plan, which is a 30-year plan, and
Hmm.
thinking about we might have finished all this work by the time I'm 60.
When Martin Gallagher was there before he left, and as one of I think it was one of his last interviews,
Mm.
I asked him what his most proud moment was. He goes, "Oh, when we got the ring road signed off." I'm like, "Oh, when was that?" 1984, and we've just about finished it. I'm so
Yep.
proud that I got to see it all the way through. I was like, "Wow, that's some very long term stuff." And the ring road's something that's working relatively well. Seems to be working well. Um, are there sort of big intergenerational projects that you're kind of excited to see go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, it's real weird to be in your 30s and be like, my grandkids are gonna love this. Like it's it's a sort of, I feel like quite often I'm living in two mindsets. I'm living in the
Mhm.
day to day and responding to the day to day, because a lot of the things that people come to you with is, my rubbish today has not been picked up, which is yes, very very annoying. And we're often working, to relieve those kind of headaches for people, but also living in that 30-year mindset of, like, if we get Eastern Pathways, which is connecting, I think, someone fact check this for me. I'm sure someone will tell me in the comments if I get this wrong, but it's something like between 19 to 23 schools, kindergarten, churches, and community facilities, connecting them together all along Peach Grove Hukanui Road. Um,
Oh,
that will maybe be finished in 30 years' time. And
right.
like that's such a prominent street in Hamilton. It's extremely long. It goes for kilometers and kilometers. And to just think about the fact that that could have in the future bi-directional separated cycle lanes, a priority bus route, like it transport wise could be completely transformed, but also the lives of the kids and parents and communities who live along there can have such vastly different options to what I have today, which is I might bike it, maybe. I'm really really confident.
So
So
last time I was in Hamilton, which is like about a week or so ago, um, it was getting used to the new cycle layout as a driver was interesting. And like it's not complicated. It makes sense. You've got things locked off, so I can go. Well, obviously my car can't fit in there, so this has got to be a cycle lane sort of thing. And there's a little road marker thing that separates it, so I can't. I
hit
literally have to
sticks.
drive it. Yeah,
Hit sticks or
those two.
cycle ones. They're very, we always name things fun things.
They're very
Cycle
fun names.
ones.
Um, but that kind of infrastructure for me growing up in Hamilton, very new, very different. And it feels a bit strange because I'm sort of sitting going, well, this I'm not used to, but I can see the use of it. I can see how that can go forward. And you're making use of resources that were already there, like roads that were already there. You're not creating new spaces or anything like that. Um, from where you sit as somebody who's just turned 30, what's the attitude like from those older people around the table who are much more used to things the way they were when it comes to thinking intergenerationally?
Yeah. Um, I think certainly the I don't know what's a nice way of phrasing this? The new addition of some grandchildren into some people's lives, I think, is a very pointy,
Yep.
um, very solid reminder. And my colleague Sarah Thompson, quite often when she's
Mhm.
been discussing, um, the accidents that happen with small children on the roads, she can get quite emotional about that because she has a small child and is about to
Mhm.
potentially imminently have another one. Um,
Oh, wow.
so I think that some of it depends on what's prominent in different people's lives. But I mean, there's a fun irony, and I'm the baby of the chamber. I'm the youngest elected member, but I also have the disability and age-friendly portfolios.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, but for me, disability is a really big part of my life. Even at the age of 30, I didn't need to be an older person to be experiencing that. And I think that um, yeah, there's a lot of people with a lot of empathy, I guess, with for people uh, who understand that things have to change. And that's a big conversation that I have quite often with people is, if you've been on in any Facebook groups of late, there's a lot of there's not a lot of tolerance for change. And a lot of people really
Mhm.
struggle with things like roadworks. And I think it's quite ironic sometimes when people call things like roadworks um, anti-car. Like, oh, you're putting in all this infrastructure that's not for cars, it's anti-car. And it's quite often
Um,
I kind of remind people that, like, well, yes, you might be inconvenienced for a few weeks, or even sometimes just a few days, but a lot of the time these changes are to protect people and make them safe, because unfortunately we lose a lot of people on our roads. But also it's pro car because if we get people out of their cars and into bikes and scooters and public transport and trains, actually there'll be so much less congestion. It'll be a way better experience for people who want to drive their cars. And there's some people like ambulance drivers who we absolutely want in their cars getting
yeah,
around
we
the
we
city as
we
fast as
want them to be
possible.
able to do what they do. Yep.
Yeah, so I think sometimes I kind of come back to, like, you know, with everything in the past couple of years, with COVID, with all the many natural disasters we keep seem to be having in this country, like
I'm not gonna
it's
comment. I was waiting on Friday.
yeah, my condolences to you as an Aucklander.
Thank you.
um, but it's easy to be caught in the right here, right now, and to think, oh God, I'm stuck in traffic again because they're doing some roadworks that, you know, of course, when you've got 50 million other things on your mind, if you're really at the pointy end of our cost of living crisis, if you're working multiple jobs, if you've got mouths to feed and a roof to keep over your head, of course, you're just going to be inconvenienced by this. But I think a lot of our job as local leaders is to pull that up a level and go, hey, we're trying to make your life easier. Like, this is all for our collective well-being.
See, this is another thing that actually came through in the report really strongly is getting people at the voting level more interested in what happens in their democratic elected representative sphere. What would be your experience on this? Because obviously you've run a couple of campaigns now and you've worked in a couple of different areas where getting the public on board's been really important, like your work at the DHB, for example, with the COVID vaccination rollout. And going from something like that to an elected official, how do you think councils could do that better to get people interested enough that they go, yeah, I want to know what's going on more than just complain and get out there and vote?
Yeah, definitely. And you've stolen the idea of a blog post I was going to write, which is like,
I'm
how do you?
sorry.
It's okay. I'll tell you all my secrets, and then I'll transcribe this later and pretend I wrote it from scratch. Um,
Done.
but I was thinking, like, how do you create a counselor? And it's kind of ironic we mentioned before about the complexities of the technology in the chamber to live stream it. So a very good friend of mine who actually lived a couple like houses down from me in Hamilton East when we were both students, both studying the same degree. Um, he got a job being the like live stream camera operator for city council.
Hmm.
And so he used to like have all these opinions about local government that I had no concept about as a 18, 19-year old, and just being like, oh my God, you would not believe what Gary Mallett said in the chamber today. And I'm like, who's
is
Gary
it a,
Mallett? Why are we
is it
angry at
about
him?
pink paper?
Oh, possibly. It would have been around that time.
Hmm.
Um, but just it was really interesting to have someone like my own age when I was, fresh out of high school, like be racked up about local government. Um, and I was thinking about the fact that when uh, the 2016 local government election,
Hmm.
a friend of mine who was on the board of the YWCA sent me a message and was like, "You should go to this event." And I was like, "Okay." When one of your friends is like, "You'd like this, do this," and
Yeah,
you're like, well, "I'm not doing anything else."
yeah. I'm doing
I
that tomorrow night, to be honest.
could be doing a uni assignment, but nah.
Yeah.
And so I went along to the YWCA's Women in Politics event on International Women's Day, which is only women candidates. And I remember like I had my little notebook because I had literally no idea what this was going to be like. Um, and it was so tremendously interesting. And I just remember sitting there like,
A lot
this
of
is
switches going
wild.
on, and
This
yep.
is wild. And it they did they did a couple of speeches, all the candidates, and then they came and did like speed dating with us.
Hmm.
And it's so funny because I found my notebook from when I went to that event, and I wrote down because I ranked all of the candidates, some of the candidates who are now my colleagues. And I literally wrote down, I was like, I want to be best friends with Anna Casey Cox. And if you don't know, Anna Casey Cox is now one of my colleagues on council, but
Hmm.
she also used to be an employee at the organisation that I'm chairperson of, Go Eco. Um, and yeah, it's just so funny back in 2016 that I was identifying the candidates that I thought reflected my values and reflected the things that I cared about. But it's just steps upon steps upon steps. I had a friend who was racked up about it. I had another friend who was like, "You're nerdy about stuff. Go to this thing." And I was like, "I am nerdy about stuff. I love this." And then I remember obviously Chloe Swarbrick's campaign for mayor, and obviously Paul, obviously inspired by your campaign.
I don't know what you mean. Back in the day,
This is my favorite fact about you. Um, that you was it at 18 ran for the mayoralty of Hamilton?
something like that. Yeah,
Something like that. Um,
yeah.
and then the year after in 2019, um, we have Radio New Zealand as our alarm in the morning because we're nerds, obviously. And I was awoken to multiple times hearing, Kim Hill or whoever it was,
Mhm.
just like ripping into some Hamilton local government politicians, being like, "You don't care about climate change?" And they're like, "Nah, not really."
Again,
Or
is that Gary?
it may have been, but it was you know Gary Mallett and using gay slurs
Yeah.
in meetings. It was Siggy Henry parking in a disability car park in her branded car and wearing a anti-vax t-shirt to an autism event. It was James
Hmm.
Casson making comments about the Christchurch massacre, which happened in the same year. It was multiple instances of being made aware of how grossly inadequate our local leadership was and being earnestly embarrassed. Like, I'm a real, if you've ever had if you ever tried to make a joke about Hamilton to me, like, I do not have a power of it.
Hmm.
And it's like hearing again and again and again all these people embarrass us. I was like, absolutely not. I will be like, somebody needs to stand. And I went around and I asked all my friends, I was like, would you stand? I would support you. And they were like, no. And I was like, damn it. I I'm a big hypocrite if I'm willing to ask all my friends to do this, but not me, you know? And then obviously I ran for the mayoralty as well as city council. Um, Something I'm very proud of is the Waikato Times listed me in their top candidates for the mayoralty at the sweet old age of 26. And I was 80 votes off being elected to council, which as a first time candidate, I think
That's impressive.
made me feel like it was worth doing again. So
Yeah.
I ran again, and then here we are. So I mean, that's the story of maybe a decade of being in Hamilton and being around different people who were like, "Hey, you probably would care about this if you know, had some time to dedicate to learning how much it might need you."
How many of your friends have you approached? And I'm guessing they've had time to get used to this now, but at first, it was just like, "Ugh, council, local body politics. Ugh."
Somebody that I know forgot to vote in one of the local elections. And they was
Ah,
really ashamed. They were like, "Louise, I have to tell you this because if I don't tell you, I can't sleep at night. But I already can't sleep at night because I forgot to post my papers." And I was like, "Are you okay? Because you don't seem okay. You seem really stressed about this." And they were like, "I just know how disappointed you would be in me."
oh my god.
But another friend of mine also like messaged me and was like, "This is me posting the paper.
Mhm.
I did it. Leave me alone. Stop reminding me to vote. It's fine. I've done it." Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's such a beast. There's so many different aspects to it. It's not intuitive to the public, and um, I kind of love talking about it with my friends who are kind of like, "Hey, swales," and I'm like, "Oh, you're talking about my favorite subject. Let me talk to you about swales." And they're like, "Okay, but only as a little treat for you."
I'm sure that is a conversation you've had a number of times in the last week.
Oh yeah, mate. I'm like, I'm like, uh, who was it? It was he was Ryan Hamilton was chairing today, but
Mhm.
yesterday he mentioned swales in a meeting, and Angela O'Leary, our deputy mayor, like looked at me like swales, and I was like swales, and I saw this like giggle went around the room of like, oh no.
So one of the things that for me personally, I have a problem with the Local Government Act at the moment is that there is no such thing as citizen initiated accountability.
Hmm.
So it's the reason we can't get rid of elected officials once they're elected.
I was gonna say, is this brought on by your own circumstances, Paul?
No, no, no. To be fair, I've been looking into this since October, and the work that I did with the terrible local body candidates people shouldn't vote for, and the ones that got elected. And then this weekend, I had a whole bunch of people message me for some reason out of the blue, just going, "Hey, so how do we get rid of a mayor?" Ah,
I bet you'll know the answer to this.
yeah, pretty much. And it's been kind of interesting because half the conversations came from people I work with my council contract up here, and it's like if I'm not going to say any more than that sort of thing.
Yep.
But there's a very broad understanding now after this last weekend that sometimes people aren't right for those positions. And it's across the board. It's city councils, it's mayoralties, it's even local boards and local sort of
Mhm.
committee levels. Um, do you have any sort of, like, to be fair, Hamilton City Council actually has one of the best processes in the city for in the country for this, in terms of citizen initiated responses. The code of conduct information is open for anybody to lay an application for. It's not the same in most places. Do you think that there is room there to change that, or do you think it's important that we know that we've got these people in here for this time and it's almost impossible to move them unless it's like an actual emergency, like they get sick or they pass away?
Yeah, I think it's complex, and I don't know if I have a firm decision on this either way. But I I do often remind myself that other councils have been sacked and commissioners have been put
Hmm.
in because they did not play nicely with each other and they did not do their jobs. So even though I'm kind of like, whoa, 3 years, this is gonna be the longest I've ever had one job for, outside of being a freelancer, which I was for a very long time, but you deal with different
Yeah.
clients. Um, I do think about the length of term a lot, and I do think about the fact that in some ways, yeah, you're like, well, 3 years, but then it's like, well, no, it's still not guaranteed. Like something, you know, if something became truly terribly dysfunctional, you could still be removed. But
What do you think of the proposal then to increase it to 4?
oh, it's so horrific having a local election and then the next year having a general election. It is
Yeah.
horrific. It burns the communities around people out.
Hmm.
So I would really love for it to be local government break year, general election break year.
Hmm.
Like, just spread it out a bit more, give people some time to kind of chill out.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, it's challenging. The whole dynamic of it is really challenging, because I think sometimes there are people elected who do not think they were ever going to be elected, and I certainly hoped I would be elected, and I
Hmm.
made decisions. You know, I I texted my manager like about 20 minutes after I got the phone call, and I just like put in all caps like, I'm resigning, and she was like, that's great.
At least they know, like that it didn't come as a surprise.
Yeah, yeah. But there are other people who sign up to elections to get a platform and to be
Hmm.
able to speak to a much wider range of people than they ever would organically on their own. So sometimes those people can truly be elected.
One
Um,
did, at least, around your table.
well, I'm relieved that some of the other candidates who are very chronic for doing this did
Hmm.
not. But I think we also have to be really mindful of the ways that referendums have been used to punish our most marginalised, in terms of like Maori wards,
Hmm.
that could be challenged. But also, I think as well, sometimes people don't realise the complexities of petitions. So for a petition to count with Hamilton City Council, for example, you have to have at least 150 people sign it who are registered voters for Hamilton. So
Is
if
that
you
a
have
percentage of the population?
I'm not sure. It's just the figure I was given. But if you have, I don't know, the entire population of Wellington sign that, say for example, you should get rid of your mayor, it doesn't really matter if they
Hmm.
don't like live in the place. And so I think sometimes there are things that are like, oh, obviously this proves this thing because all these people signed it, and it's like, but the actual mechanics of how that will be
Yeah.
um, listened to in council,
As an
you may
example,
not understand it all.
there is a petition, I believe, at the moment to remove Wayne Brown
Mm,
on petition.org, and anybody can sign that. So they don't even have to be in the country to sign that. And I don't know how many votes they've got or anything like that, but that obviously isn't going to be legally binding in any sort of shape, way, or form.
yeah.
Um, it does strike me as the sort of thing that people don't really get the complexity of.
Mm. Yeah, and I also think like there is a degree of grace to be given to people, potentially not when people have died.
Yeah,
But there
yeah.
is also local
It's one of
government.
the reasons we don't have any Aucklanders on tonight, is because I'm well aware, like just what I do with events there, how freaking busy they are at the moment. And I have never been more grateful for Richard Hills to be my local councillor.
But
The
you were
man
like,
is a
I know
legend.
who's not doing anything tonight.
No, no, it wasn't it. I have actually reached out to a couple of people, and like one of them was a councillor from Whangarei, because I wanted to go over. You're going to love this next bit, actually. I got sent an anonymous email message that was sent to all of the councillors in Whangarei from Voices for Freedom, who teamed up with Democracy Northland for the build up to the local election. Their endorsement for mayor was the guy who won, Vince Carrillo. This was a letter basically saying, "We got you elected. You do what we say now."
Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to have a chat to him about that, but he's got a new baby, so
Oh, fair.
so very busy night for him. Um, yeah. So, but I will go into that later. That will be up tomorrow. Like that's my post tomorrow morning, because it
Yeah.
can. But yeah, it was for me. It's been really interesting seeing how our councillors have stepped up, and I've been very impressed with most of the elected officials around Auckland.
Mm.
You guys haven't had to deal with that. I saw the
No.
river burst its banks a little bit, but other than that, it was
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've been really fortunate, but some of that is good luck as much as anything. We just haven't quite had the same volume of rainfall. But at the same time, that's what we know climate change will do in Hamilton. It will
yes.
create more extreme weather events, particularly flooding.
Hmm.
Um, we don't have any volcanoes. We don't have any earthquake fault lines, or at least not, ones unique
Hmm.
to us. Um, Flooding will be what will happen.
Yeah, it
um,
is. Although absolute credit, I saw like the banks burst, and I know Paula Southgate, the mayor's been a little bit busy, she still found time to jump on social media and just say, "Hey guys, stay away from this just in case."
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's nice when you've got a mayor who does things.
Yes, yes, and I must say, our mayor is so extraordinarily busy all the time. You know, just absolutely flat out. I mean, even I went to an event on her behalf to deliver a speech because she wasn't able to go, and so whilst I ran for mayor in 2019, you know, I don't know if I have the stamina. It's a really really
it,
big job.
it is one of those things that people don't realize just how big it is.
Mm,
At the
mm.
time.
And
Um,
the other thing about the mayoralty as well is that you speak on behalf of the city, whereas I'm a city councillor and I can tell you what the council's decision was, but I don't have to sort of be a uniting leader in the same way. I'd like to be. Don't want to be divisive, but like I do get to have my own opinions and to represent a particular viewpoint, and that was what I was elected to do. But the mayor is another type of leadership again.
hmm Would you
But
run again?
for the mayoralty,
Yeah.
wow,
I
do
mean,
you want to know
obviously,
a fun fact?
is this the exclusive? Yeah.
When I was doing some family history research, my great cousin, I think might be a good description, was once the mayor of Ngaruawahia.
I didn't realize Ngaruawahia had me. So I suppose it makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but this was before it was a like unitary,
Yeah.
council, which is now Waikato district. But yeah, I did joke one of my icebreakers for when we met all the new councillors was that yeah, my cousin was mayor of Ngaruawahia, and one of my partner's ancestors, I think one of his grandfathers or great grandfathers was mayor of what's that small town outside of Wanganui?
Martin?
Nah, like Patia.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
was once
Yep.
mayor of that. So I was like, I feel sorry for any children we have. Local government will be in their blood.
It's genetic. It is
Yeah, yeah,
genetic. But I know your headphones are probably screeching at you at the moment.
they're beeping.
That's all good. I'll let you sign off now. I will finish up here. Thank you very much for tonight. For those that are watching afterwards and downloading that, where can people follow you so they can keep up to
Oh,
date with what's happening?
you can follow me almost anywhere, although someone tried to hack my Snapchat that I've not used in like 10 years today. So you can't find me on Snapchat. I will not accept any requests, but you can find me on Twitter at Say Cheese Louise, on Instagram at Louise Hutt, and on Facebook if you search Louise Hutt, Hamilton City Council. Yeah,
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you very much.
no worries. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Go and recharge everything.
I shall do.
All right. I'll talk to you later. So yeah, Louise Hutt from Hamilton City Council. The thing that impresses me the most about Louise is her run for council last term, where she just missed out by 80 votes. Um, she was really active in getting people out there to vote, and Hamilton City Council was one of the few places that actually saw a jump in voter turnout over that last election, which is absolutely amazing. Incredibly passionate about local body elections, which is why I wanted to have a chat to her after going to the seminar today. And the seminar had some really interesting facts attached to it. Like they've had 5,000 submissions so far on how to change local government or what needs to be changed in local government. And if you haven't yet had a chance to go to it and have a look over it, then what you need to do is actually go and visit this website down here, thefutureforlocalgovernment.govt.nz, and you can make a submission up until the 28th of February. Now, they can't extend the date, even with everything that's happened around the country this week because that's sort of the cutoff date to be able to get the final report done by the 19th of June, which is when it will be handed in and made, I think it's made public at the same time. Now, the report that you see there on this website now that you can do your feedback on is not a draft of the final report. It's deliberately set up so you can go out, they can go out and get information around what people want to see changed, what are the issues that they're talking about, and what sort of evolution there needs to be to local government. So head along, have a read. It's really super simple. You go through section by section. It gives you briefs. If you want to answer things, you can. If you want to skip things, you can. The sooner you do it, the sooner that they can start reading it and taking it on board before they start writing the next draft, which is the third and final draft, which will be handed into the Minister of Local Government, the new Minister for Local Government, Kieran McAnulty, and LGNZ. So the two of them are sort of working together on this one. Definitely go and have a look, because if you've got concerns around things like whether or not your council needs to be amalgamated or not, whether or not Auckland Council needs to be kept separate to the way it's run to other councils just because of how large it is and what it incorporates, even things like user created or sort of social created accountability for elected officials. And again, not talking about anyone specific here, but if you want to find a way to remove an elected official who you feel is not doing their job or is not meeting the criteria of their code of conduct on a regular basis, that's where this kind of user generated accountability comes into. So go through there, future for local government, this thing that's ticking across the bottom here, .govt.nz. Super simple, super easy. And let me give you an example as to why you need to go in and actually have your say on these things. This was sent to me today. This is actually a letter that was sent to the elected officials of Whangarei District Council up north. Basically, it is, I don't know, see if I can get this right. I always get my angles wrong on this one. You'll see here Voices for Freedom Whangarei Local Working Group. This is essentially a letter saying, we got you elected, so you should do what we say. We want everything open and honest, even though it's anonymous here. They want open, honest transparency with the way that council works. The way our councils work are pretty open, honest, and transparent. The stuff that's generally hidden from the public is for commercial sensitivity reasons. But again, this is the sort of thing that you can have your say on at this website. This is the sort of thing where you can go and give your feedback and go, oh, yes, this makes perfect sense. We need to make sure that this happens. Because when you have groups like this who have gone out of their way specifically to manipulate democracy and, in their own words, make New Zealand ungovernable, then making demands of our elected officials, that's not cool. Not at all. So safeguards need to be put in place to make sure that that sort of thing can't happen going forward. And again, if we don't get in and have our say now, those safeguards might not necessarily be put in place. But we do need a law that's a bit fit for purpose, because it was written 20 odd years ago, 23 years ago, came into effect 21 years ago. We need to make sure things change. Super simple, super easy. Right, I think I am going to wrap it up there. I want to thank Louise Hutt again for joining me tonight. She's absolutely brilliant. As she said before, her socials are out there so you can hunt them down. If you're watching this back at a later stage, you have until February 28th, the 28th of February, to get everything in and done and dusted for this review process. Super easy. I should be getting paid for this. Much, much easier. So yeah, please make sure you go to that website, have your say. Make sure that you're paying attention to what your local body councils are doing. And it is really very important that you pay attention to what the review process is. Because the other thing that came up today that's quite clear, these changes, Rachel, it's all right. You can rewatch the video. Louise is brilliant. It's amazing. Um, these changes will not come into effect under this government. Under whoever wins the election in October, that is going to be who has to look at enacting any changes to local government. So it's really important that you have your say now, and that you're thinking also big picture, long term, fun stuff in that respect. Is who you vote for central government going to have a really good working relationship with local government if they make these changes? There's a whole bunch. It's a rich tapestry. It's a rich tapestry. Super easy. Yeah. Anyway, get my breath back. All sorts of fun and games. These two images, I'll post tomorrow as well on my Facebook page at about 7:30 in the morning, so you can have a read yourself. Be very interesting to hear your opinion, whether or not you think Voices for Freedom should be out there telling people what the fuck to do because they ain't got nothing elected. If you have a look as well at the Merrill Talk Whangarei Facebook page, just Google it. It should be easy enough to find. Have a look at the conversation from some of the elected officials who refused their help, who are still feeling very pissy about this kind of thing, because that's understandable. I'd be kind of pissy about that sort of thing. Makes perfect sense. All right, guys, go have a fantastic night. I believe Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, has another wet weather warning in place, as well as places like Coromandel. So keep yourself safe out there. Stay dry where you can and help out those around you. Until next time, ka kite anō. Thank you for joining me, for joining us.